Hi, welcome to True Crime Talk. Today I'm going to be talking about the Paul Logan murder. Paul Logan was murdered over 30 years ago now. He was murdered December 23rd of 1993 while delivering food to a home in England. This is a BBC news story from December 23rd of 2023, so I'm going to start from the end. I'm going to start in the present time and then go back to what happened to him that night. But in this article from the BBC, it says Paul Logan murder remains unsolved after 30 years. Detectives investigating the murder of a man 30 years ago say they will continue to act on any new lines of inquiry as his killer remains free. And that's a picture of Paul Logan right there. Takeaway driver Paul Logan, 25, was found with fatal head wounds on farmland near Shotley Bridge, Consett, County Durham on December 24, 1993. It is believed he had been lured there on the pretext of delivering a meal. Detective Superintendent Jane Fairlamb said unsolved murders were never closed and were subject to periodic reviews. There's his vehicle right there. It says the dad of two's body was found 50 yards to his Peugeot car in County Durham. And excuse me for the pronunciations. Obviously, I'm not from England and I'm not familiar with that car name. But that's his car that he was delivering food in that night when he was murdered. It says Mr. Logan from Black Hill, who worked for a Chinese restaurant, had been called to Blue House Farm on the evening of December 23, 1993. He arrived just before 2200 hours, but was told no meal had been ordered. The householders' suspicions were aroused when they noticed his cream Peugeot car was still at the end of the lane. The father of two's body was found 50 yards from his car in the early hours of Christmas Eve. The weapon, a blunt instrument, has never been found. It was later established that a hoax call placing the food order was made from a telephone kiosk at the junction of Snows Green Road and Benfield Side Road, Shotley Bridge. Mr. Logan was asked to deliver food to Blue House Farm late on December 23rd, and that's a picture of the area. In 2018, on the 25th anniversary of his death, Mr. Logan's daughter, Natalie, who was a baby at the time, appealed for help in tracing those responsible for murdering the father she never knew. His family also offered a £50,000 reward for information leading to a conviction. Detective Superintendent Fairlamb of Northumbria Police added, this tragic incident took place 30 years ago and our thoughts remain with Paul's family and friends. If any new information comes to light, we will ensure it is fully investigated. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. So this was just last year that this was posted. So his daughter is still trying to find out what happened to him and his family and friends. His case has never been solved, and he was beaten to death with a blunt force instrument while he was out delivering food to a house that he wasn't really supposed to be going to because somebody did a fake call, a prank call, and got him sent out to that house. And that the family who lived at that house did not order food, but apparently it was just a ruse to get him out there so that he could be killed. So somebody obviously planned his murder. So this just wasn't like where he got in a fight with somebody while he was out delivering food. This was a planned murder, like a hit on this young man. This is a news article from when it first happened. This article is from December 27th, 1993, from the journal Newcastle upon Tyne and Ware, England. Like I said, I'm not from England, so forgive me for the pronunciations of these words. But it says, police extend hunt for killer of driver. And it says, detectives were yesterday making house-to-house inquiries on a bid for more information on the killers of takeaway delivery driver Paul Logan. And I noticed they use killers, so they must think or know from the evidence that it's more than one killer. The father of two was battered to death after being lured to a remote Northumberland farmhouse by a false phone call. Police say they have still not established a clear motive for the killing, but say it was carefully planned and executed. Officers say it is too early to say whether Mr. Logan's reputation as a hard man led to his death. And I don't know what they mean by hard man. They mean like he was not nice to everybody or he was involved in shady or criminal activity. I don't know what that means here. Fresh snowfalls hampered police in their search of the murder scene in a field near the Blue House Farm near Hexham. Detective Superintendent David Wilson, leading 25 officers on the murder investigation, said we are still examining the scene and at the moment are concentrating on door-to-door inquiries. We have received a good response from the people of Shotley Bridge, bearing in mind we are knocking on people's doors during the festive season. Mr. Logan's wife and two children, Michael, 3, and 8-month-old Natalie, were being comforted by relatives at their Consett home yesterday. His brother Hugh said Paul was no angel, and like anybody else, he fell out with people. But if somebody falls out with someone, this is not what they deserve. A hoax call was made to the Golden Flower Chinese restaurant in Shotley Bridge, County Durham, on Christmas Eve, where Mr. Logan, 28, had worked for 3 years. The call was later found to be made from a phone kiosk in Snows Green near Shotley Bridge. The caller ordered a meal to be delivered to the farm, and under cover of darkness, the killer closed a gate behind Mr. Logan as he talked to the farm's owners. As he drove back out of the farm, Mr. Logan had to get out of his white Puja van to open the gate, and police believe that is when the killer struck. Mr. Logan's body was found 50 yards away in a field. The farm's owners contacted police when they saw the van was still on their property 30 minutes after Mr. Logan had called. A post-mortem revealed he died from head injuries caused by a blunt instrument. So somebody was obviously very angry at him to want to beat him to death. There's a picture of his vehicle there. It says detectives search for clues near the site where Paul Logan was bludgeoned to death. So obviously he had some enemies. He was murdered by one of them, and it could be somebody who was his enemy. He didn't know who was his enemy. But it could also be something, the usual suspects, like when somebody gets murdered, police, look at their close associates and family first. Could his wife have wanted him murdered? Could his wife had a boyfriend that wanted him murdered? Could he have had a girlfriend that wanted him murdered? Could he have had a jealous boyfriend or husband of a girlfriend he had wanted him murdered? Always got to take that into consideration. This is from the Journal from December 31st, 1993. So just a few days after this happened. And it says police continue search of murder site. Detectives hunting the killer of takeaway delivery man Paul Logan yesterday continued their search of the murder scene for more clues. Snow had hampered officers combing a remote Northumberland field, but it thawed sufficiently yesterday for them to renew their efforts. A team of 30 detectives continue to make house-to-house inquiries in Shotley Bridge, where 28-year-old Mr. Logan worked as a driver for the Golden Flower Chinese restaurant. Mr. Logan of Black Hill, Consett, who was lured to the remote Blue House Farm by a telephone call ordering a meal on December 23rd. He was bludgeoned to death as he left the farm, and his body was dumped in a field. Police have still not established a motive for his killing or found the murder weapon. It was revealed Mr. Logan's Peugeot van was attacked 3 times just 2 months before he was murdered, and again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that car brand. On one occasion, the words "no legs" were scrawled onto the vehicle's roof. Wow. Police believe more than one person could have been responsible for his death. So his vehicle was attacked 3 times just 2 months before he was actually murdered. So somebody had it out for him pretty bad. And why they at first basically vandalized his vehicle or harassed him before murdering him, I don't know. It looks like if they would just start, by murdering him, why take the time to do that harassment. On one occasion, the words "no legs" were scrawled onto the vehicle's roof. So obviously, he had some enemies that I have not read about yet in my research of this case, because I'm not from England. I don't live in England, so I don't know this case like probably people do who lived in his area. But I just remember this story after all these years because at the time, around the time that he was murdered, I also, well, actually, it's probably even before that, when I was young, like a older teenager, like 19, 20, I delivered pizzas for a living. So I always remember this case. And it's also said that it happened around Christmas, that somebody could be set up like that while they're doing their delivery job. And you would, in today's world, it would probably be harder. I mean, you could lure somebody somewhere, but there would be a technology that you would have to bypass to not get caught. In other words, today with the technology like cell phones, internet, security cameras, and traceable cell phones, it would be harder for somebody to get away with this. And back in 1993, they didn't have DNA, so I guess from the phone booth, whoever made the hoax call to the restaurant to get him out to where he was murdered, I guess, they didn't find any fingerprints. And back then, they didn't have DNA. Or, I mean, they had DNA, but it wasn't like it is today. And I don't know if they got any DNA from that scene of the phone booth. And if that's obviously it's been 30 years, I guess they didn't have anything to test for DNA because now we have like touch DNA and way the technology is way more advanced than it would have been in 1993. So apparently they don't have any DNA, and that's why this case remains unsolved. So unless somebody talks or they come up with DNA from either his body, his vehicle, or from the phone booth, if they have some evidence preserved from that phone booth, which I guess not, they won't solve this case, I guess, because it's been about 31 years now. I think tomorrow, December 23rd, it will be 31 years since he was murdered. And even though his family, his children, keep his case in the media, it still has not been solved. Nobody has ever came forward, as far as I know. And, and I don't even know if the police have an idea of who did it. They just don't have enough evidence to arrest them, or they have no clue at all, no suspects at all. This is from a year later, 1994, December 23rd. Let's see what this article says. The hunt goes on for Christmas killers. Hugh and Elsie Logan will never hang Christmas decorations in their home again. The memory of pulling down streamers at their house in Shotley Bridge on the day their son Paul was lured to his death at a lonely farm has marred Christmas forever. Mrs. Logan said, Christmas will never be the same again for this family. A year ago tonight, takeaway delivery man Paul, 25, of Shotley Bridge, was lured by a hoax call to deliver a meal from the Golden Flower in the village to Blue House Farm, just over the county boundary in Northumberland. The people at the farm had not ordered the meal, and Paul's body was found in the snow near the farm early on Christmas Eve. Police believe at least two people, and probably more, bludgeoned him to death with a weapon that has not been found. Paul's father said, We'll never rest until they catch whoever did this crime. We don't know the motive. We're completely baffled, but we're sure the cowards who did this will be brought to book. The Logans have offered a £10,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of his killers. TV's Crime Stoppers offered a further £5,000. But despite a year of intensive police inquiries led by Detective Superintendent Dave Wilson, the killers have not been tracked down. Detective Superintendent Wilson today repeated his appeal for witnesses to contact him or any police office. He described the killing as well planned, but hinted that the killers had left clues behind which police were following up. As Paul Logan's wife, Pamela, and their two children, Natalie, 2, and Michael, 5, try to enjoy Christmas as a family, the hunt goes on. police want to trace two men, both well built and wearing black leather jackets, who had earlier been reported watching the Golden Flower. And there's Paul with one of his children. Police at Blue House Farm, where Paul Logan was lured to his death. You obviously can't see it because the picture's so dark. Paul Logan left the Golden Flower to make a delivery and was murdered. So it looks like obviously he had at least two enemies who wanted to kill him, and they did. But were they hired by somebody else, or were they just thugs who had something going on with him, and so they took him out? Did he owe somebody money? Was he involved with drugs? Was he having an affair with somebody? Those are usually the motives for a lot of murders that happen. I believe this area right here, where this red mark is the area where the phone booth or phone kiosk was used to make the phone call. So I guess somewhere in this area there was a phone kiosk, and this is where his murderer or murderers placed a phone call somewhere around here to set him up to be murdered all the way over at the Blue House Farm location. So obviously his murderers knew of this location, and they knew, they gave a specific address so they could set him up and plan the murder without, more in a more rural area without witnesses. See if I can zoom in on here. Takes a while. Okay, so apparently he was sent out to deliver food in this area here. And as you can see, it's a rural area. He went to the home to deliver the food, and they say, no, we didn't order no food. So they sent him back on his way. When he came in to the farm area, the gate was open. When he went to leave, apparently the gate had been closed. So I don't know if he got out of his vehicle to open the gate, or if he was attacked while he was in his car and ordered to get out. And I don't know if he tried to run away and he was chased and caught and bludgeoned to death, or he tried to open the gate and then they attacked him. I don't know exactly how the scenario played out, but his body was found in a field near this area. So obviously he was set up for murder. Somebody wanted him dead, and after all this time, the police haven't been able to determine who or why. I would think if it was criminals that somebody would have talked by now. If it was like, some local, I call them gangbangers, but, local thugs, local criminals, or whatever involved in illegal activity like drugs and stuff like that. Why, or theft, why wouldn't one of them have talked long before now? Because criminals always like to brag or talk about the crime. So it makes me think maybe it wasn't anything to do with that. Maybe it was something more personal from somebody he knew, a friend, acquaintance, or a family member, like a wife, or a family member of somebody else who maybe he was having an affair with or flirting with. It it just seems odd for somebody to go through all this trouble to kill him just because they were angry at him over something minor. It had to be either somebody wanted him dead for, like, a life insurance policy or something like that, or somebody wanted him out of the way so that they could go on with their life with somebody else, or maybe it just was he associated with or angered the wrong people and they murdered him. So apparently the police don't think this was just a thrill kill, that they set him up just to kill him just for the heck of it, because that happens too. People do thrill kills. They murder people just for the heck of it, or for a gang initiation, or just for no good reason at all. So it has been 31 years, and I haven't read anything about any suspect whatsoever. This is an article from December 22nd, 2005, so about 12 years after his murder. And it says, police to review takeaway murder. The murder of a takeaway delivery man on Christmas Eve 12 years ago is being reviewed by detectives. The body of Paul Logan was found on farmland near Shotley Bridge near the Northumberland County Durham border in the early hours of December 24th, 1993. The 25-year-old from Consett had been lured to a farm by his killers on the pretext of delivering a Chinese meal. Police have now begun a review of more than 4,000 documents, including 1,200 statements taken since 1993. Detective Inspector Chris Sharman from Northumbria Police's Homicide Squad said a lot has happened over the past 12 years and people have grown up, married, and moved. However, one group of people who can't move on is Paul's family, who are still searching for answers as to what happened that night. His children, who are now 16 and 12, have grown up without really knowing their father, and for their sake, we need people to come forward. Although this happened in Northumbria, inquiries have spread throughout the country. We believe there are a large number of people who know something about what happened that night, and we would urge them to speak to us. When Mr. Logan arrived at the farmhouse, he was told by the householders that no meal had been ordered. He left, but the householders' suspicions were aroused when they noticed his cream Peugeot car was still at the end of the lane. Police found the car empty with the lights still on and the doors open. It says doors open, so not just one door. So somebody opened one of the doors. I assume he didn't open both of the doors. Mr. Logan was later found to have suffered severe head injuries inflicted by a blunt instrument which has never been recovered. And this is a picture of the scene. Let's see if I can enlarge it. Well, I guess not. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Well, no, it's just a small picture. So that is just basically the same information. They have done a lot of interviews and a lot of investigating, and they still have not come up with who or why he was murdered all these years ago. Let me see. So at this time, his children were 16 and 12 in 2005. And now they're obviously fully grown adults, and they still have no answers as to what happened to their dad. It's just perplexing because it seems like, a planned murder like this, obviously somebody had it in for him. So unless it was just a thrill kill and they randomly chose a delivery driver who they had seen before, they knew in the area, just for the heck of it, for whatever reason, if they knew him, it looks like police would know who was angry at him and why they were angry at him. And maybe they do, and I just don't know because the police don't release that information. But I haven't read any good reason for him to have an enemy who would want to kill him, other than he was a hard man. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. What kind of activity was he involved in? Or how mean to people was he to make some people think that he was a hard man? I have no idea. When all else fails, let's see what the good people over at Reddit are saying about this case. Sometimes you can get some good information on here because people on here will post things that I haven't found in my research yet. And this looks pretty recent. It says 15 days ago. This was posted 16 days ago, the Paul Logan murder, and they posted a video from YouTube on it. Let's see. This commenter says, I remember this case from CW. It seems like there was a lot going on in one section of his life that his friends and family were unaware of or just don't want to speak about. According to news reports, Keith Suddick, who tried to blow up Paul's father's van after Paul's death, was questioned as a suspect. Okay, my goodness. So obviously there was a lot going on in this family. Okay, so somebody apparently after Paul's death, somebody tried to blow up Paul's father's van, and he was questioned as a suspect if this information is accurate. He died in 2012, but was heavily involved in trading guns and drugs and had links to gangs. So there, now I understand a little bit more. Apparently, I don't know if Paul did or his dad did or other members of the family were involved in possibly some criminal activity or shady activity, gang activity. This seems like the most likely link to me. He was involved in something underhand and ripped someone off or owed money, etc., etc. It's likely it won't be solved. Wow. So it could be that the person who murdered Paul has already died himself, either from natural causes or maybe he was murdered too. But this person that this is named here was, it says he died in 2012. So if he was the person who did something to Paul or was involved with it, obviously he can't be brought to justice for it. This commenter says this guy had enemies. When you read into it, it sounds like he was liked, but also not well liked in the local area. His grave was vandalized, and I recall something about a guy who was at one point arrested and let go, but was later jailed for vandalizing Paul's dad's work van or something. Until someone talks, this one will probably remain another unsolved. That's true, unless somebody talks or they find some DNA evidence. This case will likely go unsolved forever, unfortunately for his family, his kids especially. Says, I went on a Crime Watch murder binge on the last year or two, and this case stuck out for me. The reason was very often the police will say they have no motive, as the person seems to have no enemies whatsoever. But it was very odd, even funny, the way the detective says right away, we haven't found a motive yet, but we have found there are a lot of people who hold a grudge against Paul Logan. Yeah, I mean, they may not know a specific motive, but if a lot of people have a grudge against him, there's a reason a lot of people are angry at him. It doesn't mean that they have a right to murder him. It just means that something was going on in his life that put him a higher risk of being involved in a murder or being the victim of a murder. Very unusual. The Crime Watch clip starts here. Audio is very raspy. His own mother says he wasn't perfect on camera, so there is a lot more to this guy's background than we have. Those old Crime Watch murder compilations are great. The reconstructions are so matter of fact and are genuinely creepy. Just search Crime Watch Murders 19XX from 1984 onwards, I think. So apparently the show Crime Watch is similar to Unsolved Mysteries here in America. Sounds like something I'd like to watch. Crime Watch, when broadcast at a time a wide array of people would watch it, it was a fantastic resource and very detailed. Let's see, two more replies. Let's see. That daytime show they do now just doesn't feel right. There isn't enough hard-hitting, sinister crimes on it for it to retain that dark vibe the original series had. It's also inevitably only watched by a certain age group who more than likely witnessed very little of these events. So this is just some information on Reddit. So this clarifies some things for me if it's accurate that there were things going on in his life or within his family or in the area he lived that could have put him at higher risk for being a murder victim. So this is some information on the Paul Logan case. Please, if you know anything at all, contact local law enforcement to give them the information, because I know his family and his kids and his grandkids or future grandkids would love for his case to be solved. Because as far as I know, he may have, I don't know what he was involved in his life or what was going on in his family, but he seems like, I mean, he was out working at least to support his family, so he doesn't seem like a totally evil person. That, there's never a good reason to murder somebody in cold blood, except in self-defense. I can't think that he did anything in his life, his very short life. He was a young man to make somebody so angry to want to kill him. But if gangs or drugs were involved, I get it, because for whatever reason, gangs and drugs, murder, and other crimes just seem to be a part of that lifestyle. But he was out working to support his family, just delivering food, minding his own business when he was set up and brutally, brutally murdered. So if you know anything at all, please contact law enforcement and pass along the information. Remember, there is, as far as I know, still a £50,000 reward out for information leading to the resolution of his case. I don't know all the details of the reward, but you can look it up. And remember to stay away from criminals and don't be a criminal, and stay away from perverts and don't be a pervert.